holiday. So I'm just going to do a fairly brief rundown of just the history of Samhain and other holidays that happen around this time of year. And then I'm going to pass it on to Rita, who's going to give us a little bit of a ritual this morning. So first we'll talk about Samhain, which is a pagan religious festival. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Do you mind pulling the microphone closer to the
Yes. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just stand a little bit closer. Okay, so Samhain is a religious festival that originates from Celtic spiritual tradition. In modern times, it's usually celebrated on October 31st or from October 31st to November 1st to welcome in the harvest and usher in the dark part of the year. So as we talk about the wheel, this is when the wheel turns to night becomes longer than day. The celebrants believed that the barriers between the physical world and the spirit world break down, and they allow more interaction between humans and the residents of the underworld. The ancient Celts marked this time of year as the most significant of the 4 quarterly fire festivals. It takes place between the midpoint of the fall equinox and winter solstice. During this time of year, the fires in failing homes were left to burn out as harvest was gathered. After this harvest work was complete, the celebrants would join with Druid priests to light a community fire using a wheel that would cause friction and flames. This wheel was considered a representation of the sun and was used along with prayer. Cattle were sacrificed, and the participants took a flame from the bonfire, back to their home to relight the hearth. As the Middle Ages progressed, so did the celebration of the fire festivals. Bonfires became more personal and would happen in homes or in smaller communities, and they became a tradition that served to protect families from fairies and witches. Carved turnips called jack-o'-lanterns began to appear that would be attached by strings to sticks and embedded with coal. Irish tradition is what switched that from turnips to pumpkins. The tradition of the dumb supper began at this time, in which food was consumed, but only after inviting ancestors to join, giving the families a chance to interact with the spirits until they left following dinner. The children would play games to entertain the dead, while adults would update them on the past year's news. That night, the doors and windows may be left open for the dead to come in and eat cakes that had been left for them. As Christianity gained a foothold in pagan communities, the church leaders attempted to reframe Samhain as a Christian celebration. The first attempt was by Pope, is it Boniface? Boniface, thank you. In the 5th century. I looked up so many pronunciations before this, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. So he moved the celebration to May 13th and specified it as celebrating saints and martyrs. The fire festivals of October and November, however, did not end. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory moved the celebration back to the time of the fire festivals, but declared it All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. Neither new holiday did away with the pagan aspects of the celebration. October 31st became known as All Hallows' Eve or Halloween and contained much of the pagan practices before being adopted in 19th century America through Irish immigrants, bringing their traditions across the ocean. Trick-or-treating is said to have been derived from ancient Irish and Scottish practices in the nights leading up to Samhain. In Ireland, mumming was the practice of putting on costumes, going door to door, and singing songs to the dead. Cakes were given as payment. So now we give candy to children instead of cake. I'm sorry? Right? Like, what happened to that? The children should still sing to us. A broad revival of Samhain, resembling its traditional pagan traditions, began in the 80s when Wicca became popular again. And so Halloween looks like what it does today. And then Dia de los Muertos is the holiday that was occurring in the children's story. So I want to talk about that a little bit. In medieval Spain, people would bring wine and pan de animas, or spirit bread, to the graves of their loved ones on All Souls' Day. Now, in medieval Spain, I believe there was a strong presence of Catholicism at that time. So that's why they were celebrating the All Souls Day and All Saints Day. They would cover the grave with flowers and light candles to illuminate the dead souls' way back to their homes on earth. In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors brought such traditions with them to the New World, along with a darker view of death influenced by the devastation of the bubonic plague. El Dia de los Muertos is not as thought a Mexican version of Halloween, although the two holidays are very much alike, including costumes and parades. On the Day of the Dead, it's believed that the border between the spirit world and the real world dissolve. During this brief period, the souls of the dead awaken and return to the living world to feast, drink, dance, and play music with their loved ones. In turn, the living family members treat the deceased as honored guests in their celebrations and leave them their favorite foods and other offerings at their grave sites or on the ofrendas, which is the Spanish word for an altar, built in their homes. The ofrendas can be decorated with candles, marigolds. The bright marigolds are called cempasúchil. I believe that's the flower that was in the book, and red coxcombs. Does anybody know what red coxcombs look like? They are gorgeous, absolutely stunning. And they kind of look like stacks of tortillas and fruit. So that's why they would use those flowers, because they kind of look like fruit. The most prominent symbols related to the Day of the Dead are the cautas, or skeletons, and calaveras, or skulls. In the early 20th century, the printer and cartoonist Jose Guadalupe Posada incorporated skeletal figures in his art, mocking politicians and commenting on revolutionary politics. His most well-known work, La Calavera Catrina, or the Elegant Skull, features a female skeleton adorned with makeup and dressed in fancy clothes. The 1910 etching was intended as a statement about Mexicans adopting European fashions over their own heritage and traditions. La Calavera Catrina was then adopted as one of the most recognizable Day of the Dead icons. So that's where we got the sugar skulls and the face paint and the big dresses. During contemporary Day of the Dead festivities, people commonly wear the skull masks and eat candy molded into the shape of skulls. The Pan de Animas of All Souls Day back in Spain is now Pan de Muerto, which is a traditional sweet baked good during Day of the Dead celebrations. Now I'm going to pass it on to Rita.
The wheel of the year has turned. It is the beginning of the dark half of the year. A seasonal switch from outside spaces to inside spaces. Samhain, Sabi, Nutcracker Night, Mischief Night, and I've heard it referred to as Beggars Night. Originally, the Celtic New Year is an intercalary day. It's a year and a day. It's a day that has been inserted into the calendar. Samhain is a day that is not a day, a time that is not a time. Samhain is the best night to see the birds. The recognition and celebration of death as a necessary part of regeneration is the message of Samhain. Slaughtering animals, harvest, our foliage and plants die, or do they die? Do they die, or are they regenerated? The paradox that death is also birth, and creation requires the destruction of the old, can provide the answer to the crone's riddle. The altar, who I would bet everybody has one in their home, might be on top of your dining room table. It's a seasonal honoring. A ritual is a way of putting things into an intelligible pattern, a symbolic act that we use to give form to our experience. Rituals allow us to pass through the important changes and transitions by encouraging us to recognize and accept the emotions and fears associated with those changes. In the past, our ancestors had rituals surrounding every aspect of life, birth, adolescence, marriage, and death. Rituals are vital to us to celebrate and understand and accept the changes in our lives. Rituals allow us to structure an experience in a meaningful form, to express unconscious feelings and impulses, to connect us with the eternal. Because we are no longer in contact with the changes of the seasons, our modern society does not mean that we are not affected by them. Our entire ecosystem is tied to the changes of the seasons. Humans are susceptible to the changes of the seasons. Spring fever, summer doldrums, winter blues, and seasonal affective disorder. Most of this material was taken from the book Seasonal Dance by Moeller. Okay, for our altar, acorns and pumpkins could also be there. The candle, of course, is for air. And Shannon, I want to place 6 coins. These 6 items represent the 6 people I started the journey. Started coming to First Unitarian. And there's also a deck of cards. This is why I don't talk about that. The cards were a thing between my mother and I. We played cards continuously.
I'm going to put this on the altar. This is a United States Postal Service mug shaped like a mailbox. In the colors of the Postal Service. That was my dad. Was a mailman until he retired in 1986. And playing cards was a big thing in my family, both my parents, but it was only one game. Everybody know what this is? Not a Ouija board, but a cribbage board. And there's lots of different cribbage board designs, but this one's in the shape of a 29. And for those of you that are cribbage players know that getting a 29 is kind of like getting a hole in one in golf. That's perfect handed. It's in the 40 years I've played cribbage, no one that I know has ever got it. I used to print that in the journal if someone got a 29 in cribbage.
So I came empty-handed this morning, so I was running a little bit late. But on my altar at home, to pay honor to my past grandfather, I usually put peanuts. One of my favorite memories of him is that now I want to remind you that my grandfather was like a 250, 275-pound man. He would wear navy blue dress pants, rainbow suspenders, black dress shoes without socks, and no shirt.
Oh my goodness.
And he would sit outside and he would smoke these Camel Lights without a filter, Camel Lights, no filter, and he would feed peanuts to the squirrels outside of his park. And my grandfather was, for lack of a better term, an absolute clown. He actually collected clowns, but he was always a jokester. He was always sitting outside feeding the squirrels, and so peanuts and roller skating are usually things that I used to honor him. And then I used to have a photo, and I unfortunately have lost it, but somebody who's very important to me in the past. My stepmother, she kind of got me through a really dark part of my childhood. I used to have a picture of her standing outside of Dick's. Has anybody ever heard of the burger joint Dick's in Seattle? It's a pretty popular place of the Pacific Northwest, but yeah, so those are the people that I would like to pay honor to this time.
Pretty simple time of year. beautiful time of the year. And we need to remember that to regenerate. We need to die on and rebirth. And to make that change from exterior places and living places to our internal living spaces and create our altars. Sometimes during the summertime, the altars are our gardens, our front porches, our back patios,